I mean, say from here the voice to know the python. I mean, say Brooklyn boardroom. Me say the industry esquire. Me say J. Christopher.
Michael
Protect
Martin,
the
welcome
righteous
to the
with
Brooklyn
wisdom
Boardroom,
and
brother.
strength.
Thank you for having me, man.
Listen, I think you're probably one of the few guests that's actually from Brooklyn, like myself. So that's a win on general principle.
No.
You know, and you made a movie not about Brooklyn, but that took place in Brooklyn, posting the corner of Brooklyn's finest.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, applaud you on that work, man. I love that film, and obviously, I think we might have met recently after that. I feel like, but anyway. So listen, I know you're a busy guy, and you know we're living through the pandemic, and right now you're one of the writers that's actually working. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of, as we've talked on many occasions, you're in the process of doing 50 different things at once. So we'll just try to be strategic, get in and get out, and give our audience what they need to learn from your experience. So again, for the sake of the audience who doesn't know your background, there should be a link in the description area so you can learn more about Michael from IMDb. But basically, he's a screenwriter, he's a TV writer, and experience. I would describe your experience as you're an expertise in kind of the gritty, dark, edgy, urban space. But maybe you have another way to describe your type of writing.
Yeah, I think I would say I probably like to write morally complex characters, which usually ends up.
Description. Yeah, say moral. Yeah, that hurt. Sorry, bro. I didn't mean to put the urban title in like that. I didn't have the vocab. Moral complex characters. I like that.
But that, the thing about it, when I said morally complex, and then morally complex gets translated into this business to be New York City, Chicago, places like that. That's where people determine, that's where you make stories about people who are morally complex. Nobody thinks, a farm town in Idaho is going to provide moral complexity. So we tell stories about that. So that's kind of like what you end up in your wheelhouse, because I've written on cop shows, I've written on music shows, and I've written on like a Western.
That's right. That's right.
The landscape of TV changes. Before it used to be defined in a lot of compartments. Now we're telling a lot more stories, and I think the boundaries of cop show, medical show, those are kind of old.
Yeah.
And now I don't think we can define the genres of TV as much as we could before.
No, I love it. It's a Wild West, man. It's a great time to be in the television space. But again, I'm excited to talk to you because you've been in both worlds, the feature space and the television, theatrical feature films and TV. So it's a great, you're able to speak both languages and operate effectively in both worlds. And I can see right now, just so people who are watching this, Michael just doesn't happen to be wearing an Empire shirt. He has also been a writer on Empire, the TV series. So salute to you for your work on that show. I mean, that was incredibly successful. I mean, I think it's not running anymore, right? The last season?
No, I mean, what's going to happen is interesting. I wrote an episode, co-wrote one of the episodes that ended up being the series finale. Because of COVID, we were, I think, 8 shooting days away from finishing the series, and we couldn't. So we couldn't provide the proper ending for the series.
Okay.
Now it's under wraps and it's in development, but they are trying to do a spinoff with Cookie's character.
Of course.
In Los Angeles.
You heard it here, Brooklyn Boardroom spinoff with Cookie.
So if that comes about, I'm pretty sure they're probably going to reconfigure that pilot episode to maybe feel like the finale that it should have been.
Yeah.
But it's a possibility that might be the direction they go in.
That's exciting, man. I remember hearing, not to get too far off topic, but I remember hearing that, her character, his character, I mean, the lead, are based on real life people in the music business, real moguls that have been in the game. I can't remember who they were claiming framed around, but I'm sure that's how it works, right?
It's interesting. I think Lee would say, for legal reasons and personal reasons, he would say that there are some people from his own personal life. I don't want to speak from what he's talking about. From his own personal life of himself and his family. I think there's a couple of people who tried to sue the show.
Oh, wow.
Say, I'm that character.
Wow.
And so that's been kind of an issue that I think they probably not settled it. I think they probably fought a bunch of
Do you get media training, man? Every answer you give is perfectly politically correct. Do they give you guys media training?
No, you know what? I think it's just being in a writer's room. You have to deal with so many personalities that eventually you're like, okay, I know how to say this or how I should.
That's dope, man. Well, listen. Anyway, so jumping in. So yeah, so Michael is well respected and TV film writer. Again, we mentioned Brooklyn's Finest. Right now, he's writing on the Wu-Tang series for Hulu. We were just talking about that kind of off camera for a little bit, which hopefully we'll get a chance to delve into before the interview is over. But just keeping with a little bit of structure so everyone can kind of build up to this crescendo of your experience. Let's go back and talk about your personal history, right? So we know you're from Brooklyn. I don't know much about your backstory prior to. I remember reading an article about you. I remember you telling me that was kind of partially not, but like you were a token booth clerk that won a competition that ended up getting their film in Hollywood. Like, what's that? How did you get your start, basically?
Yeah, I would never work as a token booth.
Okay.
I worked for the MTA.
Okay.
But it's an
wait, real quick. MTA in New York City is the Metro Transit Authority, guys. The train and bus company. Go ahead.
So I probably out of high school, I started working at a bus company. So I was in transportation. The bus company got taken over by the MTA, but I moved over to being a conductor first, and then I became a construction flagger.
Conductor. Meaning you drove the buses?
Conductor opens and closes the doors, makes the announcements.
For the train, not the bus.
For the trains.
For the train. Oh, so you were on that. Oh, that's really cool. That's cool. Well, how old were you when you were doing that?
24.
So you were really young, and that's a good city job. So
it's a really good city job. Like some people to get a city job is like they feel like I'm gonna retire. This is everything is gonna be for me. That was not my perspective on it. I became a construction flagger because I was gonna have a kid, and a construction flagger gets paid an extra $1.15 an hour to work on the subway tracks. So for me, you get to wear your own clothes. You just got to put on a vest, a hard hat, gloves so you don't get electrocuted, a bunch of lights, and you're flagging down trains.
I've seen these guys back in the day. I've seen it. Yeah.
So that's what I was. I mean, they put that story out because, like, out of high school, I went to film school. And I made films. I wanted to be a DP. That was my background, was film theory. But
what film school?
Brooklyn College Film School.
Okay.
So what happened to me was that I was in film school, I was making films, and then I was making short films afterwards. And I got into a car accident at work. My back was all messed up. I was on medication. I was home. I couldn't make another short film, which was my plan. So there was a screenwriting contest, and you can win $20,000 for a screenplay. So my roommate at the time was he was in the NYPD. He was in the training program, and he had gotten chewed out because he walked into a bodega. He saw a woman selling pornography tapes to some kids, and he made a citizen's arrest. He wasn't a cop yet, and they explained to him that he was way out of line and what was he thinking, and it felt like his spirit was hurt. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that happens to every cop at some point. They just go from a service to a job. And I was like, all right, I got to write a script because I want to get to $20,000 to get a new car and make a film. And so I wrote Brooklyn's Finest. That came out of it.
What year was this?
2005, 2006, probably.
Okay.
So I write it. I've been in film school. I didn't study screenwriting. I took one screenwriting class.
You kind of wrote this freestyle. Like, you didn't have the training. You just was like pen to paper, boom.
I took one screenwriting class, and that was to write a short film. So I didn't know what Final Draft was, so I just downloaded some screenwriting format, whatever. And then I just wrote and wrote and wrote.
Wow.
And I turned it in on the last day, and then a month later, they said, you're a finalist. And so you go to this contest, and everybody there is a professional. Like their lives have been set on making films. They've got like ideas for budgets and all this stuff. I just want to know.
And they don't work for MTA.
They don't work for MTA. They're like filmmakers. And so I'm asking questions like, am I going to win because I need to buy a car? And everybody else is asking professional questions about what's going on. So I don't win the contest. Seeth Mann wins the contest. And Seeth is really interesting with Seeth. Seeth and I have become friends, not based on that moment. We met for like 5 seconds.
Wow.
I wrote an episode of Hell on Wheels, and he directed that episode. We got a mutual friend, Jamie Hector, And then we finally got a chance to work with each other like a year ago on this movie, #FreeRayShawn, that came out on Quibi. So he got the money, and I ended up meeting a producer who was a former agent, and she helped me get an agent, and I've been working in this business ever since. But the headline of everything is that I was an MTA worker.
It's a great, I mean, you can't beat that. You know, little urban black boy, you know, figures out film business, and next thing you know, he's in Hollywood making movies. So, I mean, but going back, so it sounds like, you know, that competition really was a launching pad right into the business.
Yeah.
But for that, and this is kind of my next question. So you were able to be successful in a situation where so many other young men from your circumstance were not, because you had access to an opportunity that gave you exposure to this other world. Plus, you wrote a great script, obviously. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because, you know, everybody's journey is going to be completely different. You know, when I got out here the first time in LA, it was very weird because I felt like I felt alienated from people because the first job that I got, I was younger than the like PAs and the assistants.
Wow.
And you're talking about people who've been working in this industry as a PA, or you're an assistant at an agency, and you meet people at a party and they'll explain to you that they've been writing for 5 years to get in. And I go, well, I didn't know anything, and I just downloaded some format, and then I wrote a script, and then like I got an agent and a job within 8 days.
8 days of what? Within 8 days of getting to LA? 8 days of what?
Meaning I got on a plane and I came out to Los Angeles for 3 days, met with a bunch of agents. The day that I left, I signed with an agency. A couple of days later, that agency said, you have a meeting for a job. I flew back out here, had the meeting, flew right back. 2 days later, they called and said, you have to move to LA.
What was the agency? What was the job?
It was Brant Rose Agency, and it was Sleeper Cell was the job.
I remember Sleeper Cell was dope, man. I remember you did that. And then this is on the heels of the film's release. Like, where does this fit into the film?
No, that was right before the film started going up. Like, this was just the script. Like,
people just were loving the script.
Like, I was able to get an agent, and then a couple of days later, the agent says you have a job interview.
Wow.
And the job interview is like, you have a job. And then I've been working ever since. So imagine you come out to LA to meet a bunch of people, and you explain to them, I wrote one script, and it got me an agent and a job in 8 days. And those people have been trying to get an agent for 5 years.
No, we see it all the time. You know, cocktail waitresses, you know, what do you call it, doormen. I mean, everyone's got a headshot in the script, and they're doing it for 10, 15 years, 20 years, and they still knocking on doors. And then some people, like yourself, you know, the timing is right, situation's right, everything's serendipitous, and boom, you're off into the running. Let me ask you this, going back to the script, and keep it all the way 100 with us. You wrote that script, like you said, without any training as a screenwriter. You got a template and you put it together, and it got you this opportunity. Now you've got how many years in the business collectively?
15.
So 15 years of screenwriting, pilot script, lots of experience, lots of learning, right? Looking at what you put together with that script, do you think that script can still hold up today? Like, is it consistent with the level of work product you're creating now? And if not, how did it become so good? You know, did it get you that traction? And if so, then you clearly just gifted. Like, just explain that to us a little bit.
Well, I think I explained the difference there's a difference between a voice and a craft.
Mm-hmm.
You can't on your own have craft. It's just impossible. Craft is you work on a television show on a staff, and one of the older writers explains to you what you're doing wrong, what you should do differently, what approaches you should take. You write a script, you get notes on it, and you realize, oh, I'm doing this wrong. Craft is you have to do it and then go through the bumps and bruises of what it takes to get there. Mm-hmm. Voice is just a collection of, you know, if your mother and your father didn't meet, no one would say what you're saying. That's what voice is. So I would say Brooklyn's Finest is probably more my voice than anything I've ever done. but it has the least amount of craft. Like I didn't know what craft was. I just knew I like movies. This is what I like in movies. This is what I like in life. This is what I'd like to see, and I just wrote it.
I think there's something really relevant there, man. What I draw out of that is, for those who are listening who may still feel like they're neophytes or junior writers or inexperienced, putting aside the level of craft, if you have a unique voice that is resonating in the market, go full steam. Don't resist because you don't have the craft down. Like, don't be intimidated by not having the craft master. Just follow your voice, and oftentimes something that doesn't reflect 20 years experience in the business can still get you where you got to go, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I've never read a book. I've read a lot of books on screenwriting, but I don't think I've ever read anything that lets you understand how to take what it is that you personally enjoy, what's of interest to you, and put it into a format of this is how the market needs to receive it. I don't know if it can be taught, or I don't know if it can be taught universally. Like it's your own path to understanding how to do. Like I love basketball, so if you watch Michael Jordan in his first couple of seasons, that's a very different version of Michael Jordan than the championship Michael Jordan. Like, at some point he realizes, yeah, I can jump over everybody, but I'm not going to win a championship doing that. I'll probably, twist an ankle, rupture an ACL, and then he develops an outside game, or he develops a game that he realizes, well, all the defense are doing is going to do this to me. I need to counter by doing this. Yeah. Craft is all about understanding, well, I like my stories to move very fast, and the craft of the industry might hate that style. So if you're going to make that style work, you need to figure out how to help the industry understand how to receive your voice in a way that's familiar to them. That's my analogy of basketball, in that I want to do this. The industry wants to do something else. What is the meeting point for those two things?
That's a real gem. It's funny because it dovetails into my next question, which is, so it sounds like there was a pivot, right? So, like, we know characters pivot on their journey as part of making an incredibly compelling arc. So for all of the shows, Sleeper Cell, Empire, the Wu-Tang series, all of the shows you worked on, if you were like a character on this journey of becoming this, experienced writer, when was your pivot and you kind of locked into step and started heading to the top, so to speak, or really built your traction, I see the playing field, the matrix, it makes sense to me now, I'm good, let's go. Like, when and how and where?
Yeah, I think there's probably two moments, and they're pretty close together. Yeah, really close together. I think at a certain point I was like, I don't know if I can work in this industry. TV can be so up and down. This industry can be up and down. Who you are as a writer, everybody can see you as a black writer. You see yourself as a writer. And I think I wanted to have a job that was fun, and I really wanted to work on the show Star. And I was like, I want to work on something that's fun. I want to work on something that's light. Yeah. I want to work on something that makes me feel excited to go.
You've been working on some heavy shows, people getting killed and murdered.
And also just the personalities of the people that you're working with as well. Like, all of that can have a big effect. And so when I worked on Star, because I wanted to do it and it was lighter, I think my approach to it was, I need to figure out what the voice of the show is, and then I need to write that voice. And I think I got hired on Star because it's a female-driven show and it didn't have enough male voices on it. I wanted to write the female voices because I was like, that's a challenge to me. And so I really studied and I worked hard to read the scripts and feel like I was following the flow of the show. And that instead of me writing a scene the way I wanted to write a scene, I was writing the scene the way the show wanted to write the scene. And I think in that, working on that show, working for Karen Gist, who was a great showrunner, I turned a corner and I learned how to be a professional, which was in service to the team, in service to the idea of the show. That was the first thing in television that helped me. I think in features, it was like, I worked on this thing called #FreeRayShawn. It was a rewrite. And I remember there was a scene and there's a couple and they have to reconcile, and it's very big and it's super emotional. And one of the things in my own personal voice is I love plays. So I love to write long scenes. So I can write a scene that's 8 pages long. And I've done it, and people have liked the scenes 8 pages long. So this would be a typical scene years ago. I would have written 8 pages. And when I wrote it this time, I wrote the scene, and the guy says, Ronnie comes in, and he just wants her to look at him, and she won't look at him. And he says, I'm sorry, I love you. And he repeats it until she looks at him. And then they just hug.
Wow.
And I was like, I never would have written that scene up until that point in my life. And that point in my life, I would have tried to make a bunch of words, and it would have been big, and it would have been, and I remember seeing the scene being shot, and it was like, I remember watching it, and I said, I'll never write anything better than that.
Wow.
Because what I'd learned, and this is the experience of being on a set, and I learned from talking to actors, is that sometimes as a writer, you can get locked into the idea that I'm the creator. And everybody just says the words that I say, and they do the things that I do. When you're a collaborator, you understand the actor is talented and they want to show their talent. The director is talented and he wants to show his talent. And so by me writing less, but in writing less, they were doing more. The director was allowed to do more with the scene because he didn't have the words that he needed to capture. He needed to capture the physical space and the emotion. And the same thing for the actors. The actors, he didn't need a lot of words. He just needed the goal of, you need to forgive me because I love you. And she needed the goal of, I'm so upset with him, but I can't have life without him. Instead of them saying it, they just do it with their eyes.
That's deep, man. That's another gem, though. I wish I had my little button, my thing that I play. I'll pull up button. But anyway, because what you're saying is you left room for the other auteurs to express themselves, the director and the actors, right? You gave them room versus trying to control it all by, doing everything that they would do in the words you put on the page.
Yes, but that takes years for you to like. I see it with other writers that are younger. It's almost like being in school and you want to answer the question and impress everybody.
Wow.
Because you know the answer, which is, to me, why people get in a creative space and it can be very tense. Because it's like, imagine that kid at a 10 and then you put a bunch of writers together and it's all of you are that personality. Everybody kind of brings that to the table, which makes you aware this is where contentious battles happen on set and with creative people. Everybody wants to feel like they're the superstar,
And it's funny, you started out this analogy with Jordan, and it's perfect because that's how Jordan evolved. He built up the men around him.
Yeah.
Scotty, all the players on the team, the colorful hair, he basically, supported their journey to greatness. And so he wasn't carrying every game, and then they ended up winning more championships, right?
Yeah.
Because, man, that's a really good note. It takes humility and maturity to get to that place. So that's deep, man. A lot of great gems in this. All right, so bringing it, let's go to fast forward to present day real quick. So in light of the WGA dispute, COVID-19, Black protests for change in the industry, real world things that are happening, how has the profession shifted for writers? You know what I mean? And those who aspire to be writers.
It's gonna be interesting because the industry is not letting up, but it's like the ground is moving. Like as soon as you think what's going to happen is happening, then something changes, and you don't know what's going to take place next. Like Los Angeles, which I think is back to shooting again. Certainly you start to get these spikes, and who knows what that changes on production level. Everybody's extremely afraid of another kind of shutdown on any level of what that means to unions and all that type of stuff. The one thing that's fortunate for writers is our job can be done this way, which is how I'm still doing my job on a Zoom. But at a certain point, the studios need to know that the stuff that they're paying a big staff for of writers to do can be shot and can all take place and happen. So July is going to be a very interesting month for everything on all levels. Like, I can't even speak to the WGA ATA thing because as a writer, I'm not involved in the process, and we feel like we're not getting any notification on when we're all going to be going back to our agents. I mean, in fact, we still don't have a deal with the studios. That's expired as well. So I think we're all kind of trying to barrel through and just feel like, just let me get a job, let me work, and I'll worry about the bigger issue.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it safe to say that the dispute, from your perspective and the people that your friends and colleagues, the dispute isn't slowing down your ability to develop, sell, just do what you were normally doing in the industry? Is that fair? Or?
I would say everybody's got a personal space. I would say this is the big thing about the WGA thing, and this is my personal feeling about it. We are not all equal when it comes to this, meaning the people who are going to benefit the most, and I'll say this, and some people will disagree, people who benefit the most from what we want out of the agencies are the higher level writers, which in a way, this will benefit me because I'm a co-EP, someone who can go out and sell a show. So the idea of packaging ending and me being able to have more resources to make a show or more of a back end on a show is a positive. Now, if you're a staff writer, you probably worked really hard for 3 or 4 years to get an agent. And that's the only person who would represent you and get you work. Having to fire that person means all of the work that I did to get someone to represent me is now gone. And now I'm back to where I was before. Square one. Managers are overhauled because as soon as this thing hit, people jumped to that space. So if you're a younger writer, this is very scary to be in. If you're not, I mean, I get phone calls from people I've worked with before, or people at a studio I worked with before about work, because I've had the years to build up those relationships. For most people that are young writers, your relationship is your agent.
Wow. So basically what I think you're saying is, look, you're not hurting for work and business opportunities. You're good through COVID, protests, ATA, WGA dispute, you're good. However, the men and women that are 2 or 3 rungs below you, staff writer level, maybe story level, probably are having a hard time moving their material around the board.
And I would say that's more of the numbers that are applying for jobs are people mid-level, lower level than people upper level. Like when you're upper level, sometimes you just work for your friends.
Wow, I guess that's...
Sometimes the people that you've known at a studio for 10 years are like, you're the first person I call when I have a new show. So it's very easy for you to say, let's fight this fight.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about getting out of this is, I could have brought a summer home in Mammoth. Now I can buy one in Aspen.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody else is just like, I need my health coverage.
I need to eat. Yeah, I need to eat and have health insurance,
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And then the other part of the question was, and it may still be early, but again, it seems like everyone in the industry is like, not everyone, but most of the studios and most of the high profile producers and agents are yelling BLM, Black Lives Matter. We're back in a place of like, we want to empower you with telling your stories. And so it sounds to me that this is a great time for the African American community to secure work, to sell material, because they're more receptive even than before to our material. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd say it's accurate. I'd say what I hope comes out of this is not just the idea of, and I don't mean to discourage anybody else like Will Packer or Lena Waithe or Issa Rae, because what happens sometimes is we empower an individual to empower the masses instead of making sweeping changes that are effective. One of the things, like if you get to see casting notices, many times, the character isn't specified to be white. This character is just assumed to be white. If the character is not white, then that has to be said. So I'm not an actor, but the idea that a good role is assumed to be a white person.
That's a great point.
And if you're going to have a role where the person is black, then the character needs to be representing black people.
Wow.
I think that's a bad trend. I think that's the trend that really needs to change, which is, here's a good role. Let's just get the best person, regardless of race, to fill that.
I think you just took us behind the curtain with that one, bro. Like casting, everyone understands that casting notices when the race is not identified. The understanding, by and large, is the actor is expected to be white. That's a revelation, because those of us who don't read casting notices have no idea about that. And like you said, that's part of the systematic change that you're not going to see in a commercial campaign about more black people on screen. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
Those are the things. That's great. That's really, really great. It's a real. Okay, so let's get more into the mechanics and let's go behind the curtain even more, right? So, but let's start out with thinking about it from the point of view of writers who are just beginning to pop and get things moving for themselves, and they have options. So let's take you back to staff writer on, Hell on Wheels or whatever, or the Sleeper Cell, whatever. But present day, if you have an option to focus your career as a writer on features or TV, and putting aside the COVID-19 thing, what would you recommend, just based on where the industry is today, they would focus their energy?
I would say one the first thing is, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Is the first thing. And then if what you want to do is work in television, and television has never been hiring more people. They're trying to have more diverse voices. So the money is in television. Now, if you like, I love features, but the thing about writing in features is that features are taking a bit of a change, in that drama is now the work of television, whereas movies are going to be more spectacle driven.
That's right, franchise, tempo.
And also spectacle driven, but it's going to be unique because television is, Game of Thrones set the standard. Television can look like a movie.
No question.
You can spend enough money and make it feel like every Sunday we're going to watch a new version of the movie over and over again. I think, and I'm hoping this happens. I'm sure the next Game of Thrones spinoff will go up that level as well. But Amazon has made attempts to make big spectacle shows, and they haven't worked.
Mm.
Some other places are probably going to do the same thing.
Mm.
Spectacle staying in movies means that if you like writing feature films, the majority of the money in feature films is going to be a heightened version of something.
Mm.
If you like gangster films,
Mm.
I think The Irishman might be the last gangster movie we're going to see for a very long time.
Wow.
I think television has taken over the gangster genre completely.
Wow.
So if you want to write a gangster film, they better turn into zombies or vampires.
Wow.
Or something.
That's deep.
Like, that's just the way the business. Think about it. Martin Scorsese is the king of gangster movies, and it didn't, Universal didn't make that movie for theatrical release.
You're right.
Warner Bros. Didn't make that movie. Netflix made it.
You're right. That's a really good point. So let me ask you that same kind of question, but from a different perspective. You're a person who had experience in the indie world, but here you are having built your career in traditional, entertainment, Hollywood, or commercial, like TV film. So, again, taking you back to day one, options, go the traditional route, go the indie route. Why would someone choose one over the other? And why did you choose one over the other? Because clearly, as far as I can tell, you kind of just stayed on this road of being in the business and not going back to the indie roots.
I'd say it all depends on where the money and the opportunity is. I would say, and again, this is also because, your representatives try to fill you in and clue you in on everything, but they also try to steer your career in a certain way. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's indie opportunities that have come my way that I'm not aware of, but for the most part, indie films are harder to put together on the feature side as far as like an assignment. Mm-hmm. It's a harder thing to do. It's more of the route of if someone goes out and they write a film and it goes to Sundance, and it's a small indie, and it gets some traction, everybody who's in the indie business wants to talk to that person about what they can do next, because it's in the space of what they're doing. It's really hard to operate in two spaces, because it almost involves you meeting an overload of people. You can kind of split your time in a certain way. There's almost a certain sense of wanting to be strategic about what can give you consistent income, and then what can actually give you like your creative like juices just to get flowing. I think I've been fortunate enough to work on film projects in between TV projects, and that's been like a blessing to have. But the thing about film is, you know, I've worked on a bunch of film stuff, and I've gotten 3 movies made.
Wow.
That's getting 3 movies made is a big deal.
Wow.
Like, I know people who have sold 10 times what I've sold. Like, they are top-notch screenwriters, and they might have 1 known credit.
Wow.
The list of jobs they've gotten just goes on and on.
Wow.
And it blows your mind.
Yeah, so the takeaway there is, you know, in terms of likelihood, probability, you know, the ability to build a consistent income, it sounds like the traditional world of entertainment, the studio system, quote unquote, and particularly television would be the way to go today. It
is. I mean, everything can change if you get success in an area and you stay within that area.
Yeah, you become the guy.
Yeah.
Or the girl.
You can write something that just grabs people, and then immediately they will jump and attach you to things that are like that. And you can be a new flavor of the month, and you can build yourself a nice career on that. So if you have a great feature idea that you love, you go out and you sell it. There was this great script that came out. I don't know if it was great, but it came out, and I remember it sold for like a lot of money. I think it sold for like $1.5 million. And I remember meeting with a producer on, like, it sold over the weekend, and then on Monday I was talking to the producer about it, and he said, yeah, they're never going to make that movie. He's like, that movie will never get made. He said, the reason that movie got purchased is because as an executive, it does everything that we're told you're supposed to do. It's almost as if it's almost as if executives could take their brains and say, this is what we want in a script. Somebody tapped into that and then wrote it. But what they wrote exists in a way where you could never make that film and it reaches an audience. And I remember hearing that thinking, what kind of an industry does that happen in? Wow. Where you are giving the industry what it wants. It sells, but it can never be made.
Because it couldn't connect with you. That story wouldn't connect with the audience.
I remember it was The Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I'm not lying, it was like a ninja, a samurai, a Viking, a crusader. They're all in jail. And then there's like a job that they get put on, and then all this shit that happens. But if you read it, you couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
You had to finish it to the end. And like I said, it does everything a script is supposed to do. 5 minutes is a turn. There's a revelation. The second act heats up. It does all of those things. So and everybody who reads it is going to say, yes, this is what you've told me I'm supposed to read and give a good recommendation to. But as soon as you had to break it down into like a budget, and it's going to cost $80 million.
Yeah.
What does it look like when there's a crusader and a Viking and a samurai all talking to each other? Is this going to be a super fucking flop that could make like $20 million and it cost us $80 million?
Sound like something that should be a novel. You know what I'm saying?
But that's what I'm saying about, when he said it to me, I kept saying, well, then why did they buy it?
Yeah, why did they buy it?
And he said, because they can't let somebody else do it and figure it out.
Dang, you hit a really good point, because this is something that, again, inexperienced writers and producers won't be aware of, which is, and I'm thinking more in the context of like my students and stuff, but like things get bought to be put on the shelf. Yeah. And you would not see that coming unless you're getting great advice. Because who wants to pay, because I bet you the writer who sold it for 1.5 would have been happy to take 500 just to get it made, right? And you got to know who's going to do those kinds. So that's really, really good point. So let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics and kind of the professional journey of a writer, right? So walk us through kind of the stages. So, oh no, before we do that, this is another question I was going to ask you though. What would you recommend is the first strategic step young writers should be doing? So let me give you a point to paint the picture. They have a spec, they're developing a spec, but they want to get staffed on a show. They have zero experience, zero representation. Like, what does that person do day one? What should they be focused
on? Tough. I mean, people will say couple of things. First thing people will say, and they're usually right, which is you should move to LA.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it without it. I moved here because I had a job, which is different than most people.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of have to be here because if something happens, you need to be able to very quickly get on the phone, talk with someone, or be face to face to see what happens next. I guess I always say the screenwriting contest route, because if you don't know anyone, the only way for you to get access is to attach yourself to a third party. That being, Nichols screenwriting contest. I was in the IFP, Independent Feature Project.
Mm-hmm.
There are other contests because I was in the IFP Feature Project, and then they put the name of my script and they put my bio in a book that anybody could have that goes to the IFP for that week. So I remember management companies emailing me, getting my contact information, telling me, "Oh, I saw your bio. I'd love to read your script for contention to be for representation."
Wow.
That wouldn't happen anywhere else. You can't send a blind email to William Morris and ask them to read your script. They're not going to read your script. But if a credited screenwriting contest has read your script, and if a credited screenwriting contest has read your script, put you in a newsletter or put anything up about you, you could then email someone who is at an agency or a management company and say, "I am so-and-so. My script has been featured at this place, and I want you to consider me for representation." Without a vouch, nobody's going to read your script.
But would you also say that approach is relative? I'm just thinking about the ageism in Hollywood. So, Sarah Jane from Nebraska, 45 years old, 50 years old, wrote an incredible script. Is she really going to get the kind of momentum that, Jane, whatever, from, Illinois, 25, wrote a great script and it ended up in a competition? Is ageism going to play into that? Because that seems like a level ground, but is it really level?
It depends on what you're writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because this business is weird in that I don't think I've ever seen a business where it's prejudiced against everyone. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like anyone gets out of the prejudice bubble. Like, for what it's worth, if you are a white woman who's 25 in Nebraska, if you're a white woman who's 45 in Nebraska, immediately people will say, well, what are the shows that fit who you are? Mm-hmm. If you can go on Netflix and say, well, there's a show about moms going crazy that's been in, has 2 seasons. And if you wrote a script about a mom that goes crazy, an agent will read that and say, oh, I can get her on that show.
Okay.
And she'll fit. Like, immediately everything is business.
Yeah.
If you're 45 years old and you write something that just doesn't seem to like fit in the mold of selling you, mm-hmm. It might be tough. Like, if you're a 45-year-old white woman who writes a spec script about Genghis Khan, mm-hmm. then it becomes, as an agent or a manager, how do I sell this person to work on your show?
Because they're a brand. They're a brand too. Yes. It's got to fit.
Yes.
It makes sense.
So it's like your writing could be amazing, but then someone's like, how do I get you a job?
Great point. So what you're talking about is great work product and the right brand to match with that to get set up.
Yes. Because what an agent will say to the white woman who's 45 with the Genghis Khan script, you have to write something else. I love the script, but you then have to write something that then puts me in a position to sell you.
Yeah. Because you may think of yourself as an artist, but you're just a product. End of the day,
Yes.
that the business needs to categorize, label, and put over here. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, plug you into the matrix. Okay, so now to the next question, steps, right? So what does it mean? So walk us through the various steps that you experienced and you saw on that journey. Like, what does it mean to be a staff writer? What does it mean to be a story editor? What does it mean to be co-producer at one writing team? Just paint the world for us from your perspective and experience and the journey.
I guess it was like being like a staff writer, story editor, which are the two lowest levels, which are good jobs to have. Like, it's almost like being a rookie in the NBA. Like, instead of like carrying everybody's bags, it's like sometimes there's these things that we call story documents, which might be, this is what's going to happen in the episode in 2 pages. You have to write like very much like a sales document for a studio. Like, the lower level writers usually get that job. Like, nobody else really wants to do that, so they'll give it to a lower level writer.
They're not even the 6 men on the bench. They're kind of like, the second string at the very end of that second string lineup.
Yeah, it's like everybody starts out in this business at some point. So when you look at the staff writer, you're like congratulating somebody for being in the club. And so there's not a lot of expectations for you in the room. People expect you to listen more than anything.
Do the grunt work.
Do the grunt work. Yeah. Every once in a while, be kind of active in the room. But for the most part, the idea is that somebody else is going to help you with your script, help you figure out how to be a professional. Once you kind of get past that story editor thing, you're kind of expected to contribute more.
Well, let's go back. How long, for those listening who are like either staff writers or aspiring to be staff writers and story editors, how much patience should you have before getting bumped up? Staff writer 2 years, staff writer 5 years, story editor, what's the period of time?
The way it all works is that every year you're supposed to get promoted until eventually you get to co-EP. And then you're kind of there. That's the ceiling. So if say you're on a show, right now I'm on Wu-Tang. So if you're a staff writer on season 1, and there's a season 2 and you're asked to come back, it's already been negotiated in your contract what you would get paid to be a story editor in season 2. If there's a season 3, there's already been worked into your contract what you would get paid to be an executive story editor in season 3. Now, if that's your contract. So every time you sign a deal, you sign usually for about 2 or 3 years. So if there's a season 4 and you're asked to come back, that is an entirely new negotiation at that point, which means you're probably expecting a bigger bump in pay, or you can go to another show and then get the title of co-producer at that point. It's always considered to be the best thing to be on a show and be asked to come back every year. That's the option the studio has.
Oh, when the show goes away, do you start from scratch all over again?
No, it can happen to you, and it does happen to some people. I will say some people have spent 2 seasons as a staff writer, which is not supposed to happen, but it can happen. Like I just did a seminar on Saturday about a show running seminar, and it explains that once you are given a show with an order, you are given a budget for what you can get with your writing staff. So if say you've got $80,000 that you can spend on your writing staff per episode, somebody might be a very talented number 2 writer and they might ask for $35,000 an episode, which then might limit you from how many other writers you can pay in that slot. Like there's a Moneyball theory which says you don't have to hire a lot of upper level writers. You can hire more middle level and lower level writers and have more people in the room to contribute. Now, all of that to me is based on who are the people that you're going out to meet with based on the job. The way it'll work is if a show gets up and running, a showrunner might get submitted 65, 70 scripts.
Wow, that's a lot of reading.
So it's a lot of reading, and every time you're getting a script in your email, it should probably explain this person is from this place. They would fit perfectly within this world because they worked on this show. Here's a sample that should fit within that. You read the sample. You probably don't read the whole thing. There's so many scripts. Sometimes I think I've been on interviews and nobody read what I figured they probably are like, all right, I guess he could do the job.
And no one come highly recommended, but let's just.
Or their assistant read the script.
Yeah.
Which is probably what happened. And so you kind of come into that based on all of those people and all of those scripts. You then have to make a decision on what do I think I'm going to fill this team with. Wow. Do I need a few heavy hitters and just a few low levels, and then we'll all figure it out? Or do I load my team with as many people as possible? Like, that all depends on, I guess, what you think your show is about based on the material being submitted and the candidates that you have, who you want to submit. So your sample, which is you have a piece of writing that is going to be submitted to all these shows, how appealing is it to the marketplace? Mm-hmm. You know, if you write a very specific way, you might have 4 or 5 shows that you can get up for. Mm-hmm. If you write in a broader space, you might have 25, 50 shows that you could possibly be in contention for.
So let's paint the picture that the staff writer or the person aspiring to be that person has landed an offer to be on the show. Paint the world for what they can expect. And I know you described sometimes the rooms vary in terms of levels. Some are top heavy, some are not. But just give us a general understanding of how the room functions, the players in the room, the vibe, the culture, the expectations.
It can all change. Mm-hmm. I've been in some rooms where people are very tough. Like I work, probably the best experience I've had in a room was on a show.
So give us a number of people we're talking about in the room. How many writers, generally speaking?
So it usually depends on how many episodes you've got. Like I've been on a show with 10 episodes and you have a smaller staff. I've been on a show with 22 episodes and we've had 2 rooms of writers.
So how many, when you say small staff, what's small staff?
5 or 6 writers could be a small staff.
5 or 6 writers in a small for 10 episodes. 22 episodes, I'm assuming maybe double that.
No, I was 15, 16.
Wow.
22 is a lot. 22 is a lot of episodes.
And then what's going on? Are you just pitching show ideas back and forth? Are you reading each other's work? Or what's happening in the room? What's the energy, the culture, the vibe?
Well, somebody runs the room. What I mean by runs the room is you have a board and there's a desired idea about what you're going to do today. It could be what we call blue skying. Blue skying might be, let's talk about what we want the entire season to be about thematically. Mm-hmm. Like we're going to make a season about rebirth. So everybody thinks they're one way, middle of the season, they feel some conflict, end of the season, they have a totally different perspective. And then you start talking about what that idea would be for each character. You might talk about movies or plays or anything that fits in that realm, and out of that you might come up with some ideas and pitches and stories that you think you want to tell. That's when it usually starts, which is like a broader perspective of the season, so that you're talking about themes, you're talking about big moves, you're talking about things that for 3, 4, 5 episodes you're going to build in to a big moment that you all pitched and love. Once you get on a very smaller level and you start talking about this episode is the episode where the character gets married. What's going to happen? Who's at the wedding? You can get very detailed. Like the person running the room is the person who's trying to make sure you stay on topic. Because there's a lot of, I mean, you're in a room for 8 hours, you start talking about everything possible.
You go get into personal conversations.
Yes.
Did you see what Trump said yesterday? And how was your trip to Tahiti? So let me ask you this. How does the showrunner, the person running the room, decide who's going to be assigned that script to write about rebirth?
The showrunner will assign it, and everybody does it differently. Some people like to go through order of seniority. Some people like to wait until they know what the episode's about, and then they think someone might have a perspective or a voice that fits it perfectly. Or sometimes the strategy is, because you're in a writer's room, there's a certain amount of time you're spending talking about the show, and then there's a certain amount of time once episodes are talked about, finished, and you move on to the next episode, that writer might have to go off and do writing and leave the room. So what you always want to plan for is you don't want at a certain point all of your lower level writers, staff writer, story editor with the least amount of experience are the ones doing the talking about an episode because they don't have enough experience to bring the episode where it needs to be. So you're probably strategically trying to figure out, I want this upper level writer to write this episode. And then the most accomplished writer after him, I want that person to run the room for 3 episodes. And then when my number 2 comes back, then the number 3 can write his episode or her episode. And you're interchanging based off of a big, long schedule.
Got it.
Figuring out who's going to be in the room that knows what's to be done, who's going to help a lower level writer, how many voices are there to help, who's off writing an episode.
Is it reasonable to expect as a staff writer or story editor or exec story editor to get assigned a script?
It all depends on the show. I've seen situations where a staff writer did not write one episode.
Oh.
That does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it completely depends on the person running the show. It's not looked on well for you not to allow someone that opportunity.
I see. So if there is some expectation to kind of bring up the young writer in the room and give him a shot or her a shot. Let me ask you this. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up considering the political climate that was happening in the world. How have you seen race, culture, ethnicity, gender play out in those rooms?
I for many times, I've been like the only black person in the room. Many times. And you're the black person in the room. And I've had sometimes a showrunner turn to me and expect me to be the black voice.
The voice of all blackness. Which
is like, it depends. I've seen some people that felt comfortable being in that role. I don't feel comfortable being in that role. I feel like I'm a writer on a staff and we should all understand the world that we're telling, or why are we telling this world? But you do have to be cognizant and aware of the fact that some people are recognizing that they might be tone deaf and they need someone to help out in a situation. Because I'll tell you a situation I saw that was really tone deaf and weird. I was in the room and at one point there was a pitch on the table about the character was Puerto Rican and they were talking Spanish to another character, and that the pitch was that they were going to relate to this person as a fellow immigrant. And what that meant is the struggle of being an immigrant and not being from this country and what that means and what it matters. And I remember hearing this and I was like, this can't be right. And as they continued talking, at some point I was like, all right, I got to say it. Puerto Ricans are not immigrants. They are American citizens.
That is so embarrassing.
They're born in America and they get their citizenship upon birth. They are not
That's
immigrants.
crazy. And the black guy is telling us this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
You're not no more Latin in the conversation, but go ahead.
But it then puts you in a space to realize, yeah, you do need to put people in rooms that are people of color, because those mistakes happen. I remember somebody telling me this, their girlfriend worked on Orange is the New Black, and they were on set, and the characters were making tamales, but the characters are Puerto Rican. And the actress is Puerto Rican, and she said, what is this? And she said, you're making your food. And she's like, we don't eat tamales. We're not Mexican. If anything, we'd be making mofongo. We wouldn't do this. And the other Latin actresses thanked her because they said, we just didn't feel like we could say anything.
Wow.
Because we would consider it difficult.
Wow.
If we did. So there is a certain amount of tone deafness that has to be addressed. So if you don't think you want to be the person putting up that cape of I'm the person of color, I think you should embrace it because it's probably necessary.
And the thing about what you just said, I've heard this similar in other scenarios, you as a black writer and other writers of color, whether they're Asian, Latin, so on, you're actually even more versatile than the white writer by and large, because you can speak both languages from a storytelling dialogue standpoint, right? Because you have to know how to, we've all learned to adjust to code switching and living in a world where we're the minority and having to pay close attention to what the majority does so that we're locked in step culturally, socially, all that stuff. So when it comes to writing dialogue for a white character, I'm pretty sure most people of color writers feel very comfortable doing that. But the reverse, but when it comes to the writers who are not of color, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I would suspect when it comes to writing dialogue for a person of color by let's say a white writer, they'd have a lot of trouble. Is that accurate to say?
It's interesting. I would say, and it's funny because the seminar I had on Saturday about being a showrunner, the guy running the seminar, he absolutely quoted what you said from someone that explained to them, which is that if you are Black, you cannot escape mainstream culture.
Yes.
If you're white, you can definitely miss out on the culture of people of color. But I would say that's something that this industry, probably in the last year and a half, has accepted, which means everything prior to that, they just did not accept or believe in any capacity.
Wow.
I mean, the screenwriters on, and not a knock to them, screenwriters on the NWA biopic were white screenwriters.
Okay.
The initial starting of that script was by white screenwriters. And then eventually they're like, all right, now that we got the script as close as we can get, now let's hire somebody Black to do some polishing.
Wow.
To get where it goes. And that's, I would say, is the majority view of most people in Hollywood. I think it's changing now, but their belief is, why don't I just get someone whose writing I enjoy? They could be white, and then at a certain point, once we have to really get this thing done, we'll bring in someone Black.
Wow.
Help out. But the reverse of that is very unlikely. And the other side of the question was, I would say, in my experience, writers think they can do anything. So I've seen white writers, when they think they can write Black characters, there's more N-words than ever.
That's all we do. You know what I'm saying?
It is the big, sometimes you're like, if they just won't stop. Like, it's in.
That's what we do. That's what we do all day.
But every time someone Black writes a script, they would go completely in the opposite direction. It was a very interesting thing.
Of course.
See, and I'm like, oh, writers just are like, fuck this shit. I can do some Quentin Tarantino.
Well, Quentin Tarantino, right? He's known for that with his characters, right? The Black characters always, like Samuel Jackson, right? Every scene he's in, every episode, he's always using N-word. Well, let me ask you this. So we talked a little bit earlier about like the casting thing. So like, what can be done? Maybe it's obvious to change that reality that you're not the only Black writer on the writing staff. There's a sensitivity to the need for Black writers to tell more stories and to write our own voices. Like what can be done institutionally, structurally, philosophically? What are the answers?
I think it's a lot of it is happening right now. I do think the industry is trending in the right space. I think the bumps are going to be that some people, writers usually write from their own personal experience in the world that they see. Like, you know this because we're from Brooklyn. Riding the train to Brooklyn, living in Brooklyn, New York City is the biggest melting pot. And when you come to LA, it is not a melting pot at all. So these are the people that are making the stories. And when they look at their own world, I mean, I got friends who, when I look at their Instagram, I'm like, wow, it's everybody they know is white. Like, we don't have a diverse background. So they're trying this diversity thing, and it's going to be a lot of bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Because like I said I wasn't trying to like discourage people. They kind of decide, let me throw it to a person like Ava DuVernay or Lena Waithe or Issa Rae and let them figure out how to do everything else. It's not like the industry is learning yet. I feel like they're just kind of farming out the responsibility to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. And also I'm seeing the opportunities that are going out to us, whether it's promotions, job opportunities, whatever. It's kind of going to the folks that are maybe, we know them, they're not household names, but they're kind of on the peripheral of like, super successful stuff, and not farming out or really trying to source, or bring to the surface all of the other people that are there, that are knocking you on the door. Like, I'm here, don't you see me? Like, yeah. Granted, it would probably take a little more work and maybe some structural changes, but that's where the wellspring of brilliance is going to be, and not continuing to look around and say, oh, yeah, let me make my vice president, senior vice president. And let me make my, co-EP who's been an EP showrunner. Like, no, there's a lot of the folks, you know what I mean, that are not getting seen. So, but let's jump into the money, man, the dollars, the plata. So what are some of the general fee ranges for screenplays in your experience, what you've seen, and which medium pays better, TV or film? So ranges for screenplays and pilot scripts, and which one tends to pay better?
I would say everything. One of the big things is everything is based on your quote. Like your quote is based on how much work you get and making more than you did on your last deal. So everything in ranges is going to change a lot. Like if you're new to the business, you're probably going to get a little bit of the standard and then it'll range up. A lot of what happens in this business, I would say, like screenwriting, screenwriting tends to be six figures in areas. Lower when you're new. Established is kind of in the mid-range at that place. I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're writing a Batman movie, that's the biggest priority for a studio. So that goes into the highest range possible. Pilot scripts are really the way that's negotiated in I think a very positive way is that sometimes they're making more pilots. And so sometimes what they're doing is you're going to get less money up front for your pilot, but you can develop more, which I think is a little bit of a good and a bad, which means, I know some people who have, I've got two things set up. Like the old way of going about things, which is in network, which is there's a pilot season. You sell something in pilot season and then you wait to see if it goes when it's time to like make a show happen. Like that model is on the lower spectrum. Cable television, because it's taken over, you can kind of make more in quantity than in quality. So most people I know, when they want to sell something, it's like, I got this idea and this idea. And I plan to develop these things for the next year and a half, and I'll get a staffing job while I'm doing it. So somebody can work on a show and get a nice quote on their show and then have two projects they've sold.
So let's do this. Let's add some context and play with some real numbers, right? So, and you correct me where, I'm off a bit. So junior writer, someone who's kind of new to the game, is successful at selling a spec or a pitch. Guild minimums somewhere like around 60,000 for 1 hour, maybe 65, depends. They're able to get $150,000 for their scripts, but traditionally speaking, however, considering what you just said, which is there's this freedom now to let that writer develop simultaneously another piece of material, and by doing that, that script fee gets dropped a little bit. So maybe instead of 150, they get $100,000, but the freedom to set up another project they're developing someplace else when normally they would not get that freedom. Is that about right?
Yes, it's okay. You the fact that you can do that more, it's like you're able to put your more eggs in one basket.
Yeah,
which is a good and a bad thing. I personally think we should develop stuff that we love and we really want to make. But there's so many more opportunities for stuff out there. Like, I just got up to an upper level status, and you find yourself saying no more than you find yourself saying yes, because everybody's developing something. Okay. Everybody's got this. More stuff is being put out there, which is good for the business as a whole. But it puts a little bit more pressure on the executives to figure out this new financial place of what's being championed and what's just filling up the accounting book and hopefully see it go. So I would say it's got its advantages, it's got its disadvantages. I personally think the more people that are buying things, financially the business will do better. The creative is going to be tougher, but financially it's in a better place.
This dovetails into another thing that I'm curious to hear what you think. So, we talked a little bit about this when you're trying to sell things and there's hiccups, but from your perspective and experience, when you have a great spec or great pitch and you're thinking this is a slam dunk for wherever I take it, what typically derails that sale? What typically is the reason a great script does not get sold, and then what's the plan B?
If I say if it's a great script, it's just marketing just determines everything. Like I remember Brooklyn's Finest, I got Millennium Films paid me to write a pilot script. And we got good response, but everybody was like, we just don't know why we'd make another cop show. Like, because it was a more cable and broadcast is still heavy into cop shows.
Wait, is this before Richard Gere and Don Cheadle were attacked? So just purely
No, this is after. This is like a year ago.
And they were still pushing, why would we do this? And you have these big names attached.
Well, this is the thing that's always going to be very tough, which is everybody's got to figure out what makes sense in their space. So look at Showtime. Look at that Ben Affleck, Matt Damon show. Mm-hmm. So you have Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, who like big movie stars who are like, we want to do a TV show. We won't be in the show, but we're going to be producing it. It's from Boston. We're from Boston. Mm-hmm. And it's about this interesting period in Boston. They get Kevin Bacon to attach himself to it. So you got two movie stars and Kevin Bacon coming to the table. Now that's a cop show straight down the line. There's no vampire.
It's called The Precinct, I think. This is The Precinct?
This is the City on a Hill.
City on a Hill, that's right.
And so that show gets made because it's got this star power behind it. And it's not a knock against the writer, but that's the way everything kind of works now. It's like you have to really you can't just have an idea at this point, unless your idea fits every box in that company's agenda. Like if a company says, we want a television show that's youth-based with a supernatural aspect to it that we can make on a soundstage with a cheaper budget. Like you might write a mediocre story that the financials just seem like it's going to be off the charts on what they could possibly make. And they will say yes to that idea. Because the thing about the business that's so tough to understand is the last thing you kind of understand, which is there are so many talented people here. There's always a belief that if we throw enough money at it, we can make it better. You can always hire somebody to come in and make it better. But what we can't do is hire somebody to make it marketable. That has to already be baked in. Like when I worked on Shades of Blue, Jennifer Lopez didn't want to be in the show. So they gave a script in and NBC said, no, we're not doing this. They said, if you put Jennifer Lopez in, we'll hire someone to rewrite the script and we'll make the show. And it's exactly what they did. They said, we don't want this, but if she's in it, we'll just figure everything else out later. So they literally took a script they said no to, because creatively they were like, we don't want to do this at all. But that entity changes everything, and then guess what? We'll just figure out everything afterwards.
Wow.
So that's that adage of we can throw enough money at it to make it better, but what we need it to be is marketable before we throw the money at it.
So what you're basically saying is packaging of your material, meaning adding all of the elements, the talent, is everything to get it made.
Not always. It just means in the span of the competition that you go out with, and this is the thing about the competition you go out with, agencies have packed it with packaging. Like, I didn't watch Little Fires Everywhere, but it was a book, and then they got Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon is a producer on it. She calls up Kerry Washington, why don't you do this with me? It'll just be a mini series. We got to do 8 episodes. We're done. Like, you start going out to the town and you say, Kerry Washington just did Scandal for a bunch of seasons. She's going to star in this. Reese Witherspoon's a movie star. She's going to co-star in this. You figure everything out later on something like that. But there are also the stories of shows that people really like where nobody really knew what it was going to be, but the costs were lower and the risk is lower. And so you can be that script that everybody champions and loves. It's like a lottery ticket, whereas the Kerry Washington, Reese Witherspoon thing is not a lottery ticket. That's just, you're a bully. Somebody's going to say yes. It's just who is it that's going to say yes.
Sounds to me what you're saying is it's all relative and you just can't count any one path out, right? You just don't know what's going to was
Yes.
going to do it. Okay.
But again, you can always, I mean, everybody can tell what the front runner is.
Yeah.
On certain projects.
Yeah. Okay, so now thinking about best practices in terms of quote unquote packaging, you got your showrunner, you got your attaching P, you got your actor lead, you got your director. I mean, so, but what would you say would be the one or two or three essentials you want to have locked in before you actually begin pitching to buyers?
It's I don't know. It's hard to say what could be in front of what, because everybody has different levels of things. Like one thing that's happening in television, which is a good and a bad thing, is because there's so much television, they have a shortage of showrunners.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning a showrunner who's already had a track record.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've been a showrunner for 10 years, you don't have to pitch anything. You literally can just wait for the phone to ring. Because somebody at some point is going to say, hey, we got this thing here that we really like, but we don't have a showrunner attached. Need somebody, and they grab you and pull you in. Like that's a very attractive package to something.
And real quick, in the period of time to quote unquote be qualified or perceived as a showrunner would be what, 5, 10, how long many years are we talking about?
You just have to do it. But you have to do it successfully. If you were considered a new showrunner and you had a show that you ran for 4 seasons, and you were well liked at the studio, things went well, and you are now a showrunner.
You're off to the races.
You are now considered, if there's something that like the studio is like, we're buying this thing, we just don't know who's going to run it, you can immediately just get that job.
Just got to get the shot. Yep. Okay.
So the first shot at it means it's such a stressful job that somebody needs to see that you've done the job in a way that was successful. Because in a way, you're like running a $150 million company. You
got to be vouched for. You got to have proven yourself in the trenches.
Yeah. So somebody who can have the track record, that's a very shiny piece that makes everybody feel relaxed. So you might not have that piece, but if you have something like a producer who's like really hot and really making things work, for the most part, people love to have relationships that are fruitful. And if you're someone who the industry loves, and this is a passion project of yours, that a studio gets very much like in love with the idea of working with you and having a relationship with you. That also kind of like has the same cachet. I mean, of course, if you get both of those elements, it's huge and big, because your story could be an idea and it could still happen at that point.
So it sounds to me like you're saying, if you want to pin down the foundation, get yourself a showrunner if you're obviously not at that level. And the icing on the cake is the attaching a producer that's successful and everyone wants to be in business with, right? Blumhouse, Jason Blum, or 50 Cent, or Shawn Rhimes, or yada, 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 right?
Yeah, but also that's if you're pitching something. Once you have a script, it's kind of, you have an easier way to attach people, because you can get on the phone with someone and say, this is the show I'm making, and in 2 minutes you can give them a great, compelling idea of what it's going to be. But it's just words.
So wait, you're saying when you have a spec, those hurdles aren't the same. When you have a spec script that's written, you don't have to worry so much about, gotta lock in this showrunner, gotta lock in this EP to get this over there.
Well, no, I say those things still apply. What I'm saying is, it's a lot easier when you have a script to entice someone to come on board than if you have an idea. Because if you have an idea, the big thing someone's going to say, well, where is it set up?
Yeah.
Now, say I have an overall deal at Universal, and this is what I want to do. That's almost like saying it's set up at Universal. But if you don't have those attachments and you don't have those things, and you're pitching someone, it's harder to get someone to commit to a pitch unless they have a relationship. Like if you know a director and he's like, I want to work with you on something, and you give them a brilliant, amazing pitch, they can call up an actor they know that wants to do something and make that happen. If it's a personal relationship, that's why I say the agency is great, because the agency is kind of doing that. The agency is kind of saying, we know firsthand this actor wants to do something that's a series because they need money. They can like make all of those things happen. They have those relationships and they make those things pull together. If you don't have that access, a script helps you out because of that. It's a lot easier to say, hey, here's the great idea I have, and I have a script. If you read the script and go, oh, I love this, let's start talking to people and see if we can get it.
You expedite the situation.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we're rounding out the conversation, kind of coming towards the tail end of it. So let's talk a little bit about what the current landscape looks like, right? So are there any studios, networks, or streaming services that you've heard great things about from the writer perspective? Like, hey, you know, you and your cohort are like, dude, this is where you want to take your project, man. They're great over there.
Not studios, because studios, it's tough. The thing I say it's tough about studios is when you develop, I think everybody kind of gets a reputation, but it's warranted because if I work for NBC, we have a certain motto of what we make here. So it's very different than you have to change your idea to fit a network. You know, everybody loves HBO content.
Mm-hmm.
But HBO, as far as when you develop an idea, more people will say their projects didn't go.
Wow.
At HBO than anywhere else.
Wow.
That's just how, but that's a little bit of it is also the cachet of saying we are that special. That, like, I remember David Fincher had a show and they shot an expensive pilot and they scrapped it.
Wow.
Like same thing with Steve McQueen. They shot an expensive pilot and they scrapped it, HBO. Like most other places won't do that. So the one thing I will say is, I think from my perspective, it's a lot better to be the big fish in a smaller pond. Because Epix is a network that for me, and not a knock against them, I don't know if they've had a show that defines them or makes them stick out or makes people say, you got to watch Epix.
Yeah.
So if you were to sell a show at Epix and you could be the big shiny thing at Epix, I mean, the perfect example is 50 Cent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about stars, and I don't think anybody did until Power came out.
That's right.
So that network feels like we were branded because of this relationship. And because of that, he's got like, you know, what does he have? Like an 8-9 figure deal at Star, something like that. He's got because they were able to build their brand off of a television show that he created. So as much as everybody loves HBO, if you can land somewhere that needs to build something and you can be that thing to build, I think that's a more attractive thing to do.
That's good. That's good insight. So all you know, it's all more or less pulling out the studios. The ground is pretty evenly placed depending upon where you can, like you said, build your own franchise, build your own brand, your voice would be heard amongst the masses versus you getting dumped into the sea at Amazon, getting dumped into the sea of content at Netflix, getting dumped into the sea of content at Hulu or whatever. So that's really good. So, okay, so any predictions for the future, whether it's about the business, the craft of writing?
I think television is going to keep. I hope it doesn't get lazy. What I mean by getting lazy is because there's so much content, it's so easy to click things off. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy for things to become very boring because we are watching so many devices, especially now. I think all of us are probably, I've never watched so much television in my life because you just have to at this point, or listen to more music. I think TV is going to have to become a little more, the format's going to have to be a little more exciting. And not exciting in the way of throwing money at things and buildings blowing up, but exciting in the way of like, you watch a show and you go, oh, I've never seen someone tell a season of television backwards. No, not that you would do that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But something that makes you have to stick out more because there's more of it. I mean, I think about when I was a kid, you watch TV, it was like the Incredible Hulk was like spectacle television. The Fall Guy was spectacle television.
That's right.
That was like big things that were happening.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes. Was spectacle television. And the trend that hopefully, I'm glad you said MacGyver, that hopefully will end is like remakes.
Oh, yeah.
This is a funny thing. I was talking to someone, I was pitching a project to someone that's at Will Smith's company. And I thought he was joking and I started laughing because he said, they're doing the reboot of Fresh Prince.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And I started laughing. He's like, no, we're really doing the Fresh Prince again. And I'm like, wait, there's no more story to tell there. I was like, wait, first of all, the Fresh Prince was kind of edgy when
For that time period. That's right. Black family, rich with what is it, Bel Air? Yeah.
Yeah, like when you watch, like back then, it's like if you watch it now, you won't understand the context of what you're watching. But back then, that was like, I can't believe this is on television.
Yeah.
But now when I think about if you did the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, unless he's selling drugs or shooting it up and shit, like what is it going to happen that's different?
But you just hit on something, man. Hollywood does not like to take chances and do things that are outside the norm. It repeats and repeats and repeats by and large.
Because I understand the money move.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? You're going to get Will Smith talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be like this interesting thing to like relive the nostalgia. And I can't lie, I'm going to watch it because I watched the original.
Yeah.
But then I think, because this is how I feel about remakes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever felt like I'm so glad I got to see a new version of that. Like,
it's a good point, actually.
Which I think is possible, because listen, if somebody's told me they were going to remake Cooley High and like delve into Chicago and what the fuck is happening in Chicago now, I would be like, wait, that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Cooley High got gangster, because that's not the same experience as watching it the first time. But I don't think I've ever seen a remake done that felt like it was going to make a very bold new statement. It usually is just a money grab.
Oh, you hit on something, which is really a great way to kind of round up the conversation, man, which is no matter how much we're enthralled by the creative, it's a business and it's run by businessmen and women. Yeah. So who are not focused on tantalizing and exciting you, they're focused on making money. And if we can do the same and we can continue in the process, then great, right? So that tends to lead the decisions and not the creative. There's exceptions, of course, but end of the day, the reason why we see another Avengers or another Fresh Prince is because they know they can predict money, and it's not a gamble.
Which I think puts you in a creative space of you're almost in a box, and then you have to figure out, what do I do with this box? Because let me say something, probably to the point I got to retract what I said. I thought Fargo, as a TV show, I did not expect to see it what I watched. Like, I thought that just blew my mind. Hold on. And I got to say, that showrunner, who was not a showrunner until that happened, changes the trajectory of his career. Because thinking about in that space of where we're talking about Fresh Prince, and who knows if it comes out well, Fargo was a great film that we loved. And then it became a television series, and it didn't destroy the legacy of the first film, and it felt like a real world, and it worked, which I think also fueled more remakes happening. But creatively, I don't know how much we're all saying we're just dying to see some new stuff out of the old stuff that we've seen. You know? Yeah, no,
it's yes, I mean, you know, sometimes I have the same dilemma, like it's like, you know, but let me not get off the topic. So I want to be able to get you back to your day. So anything wait, before we do this, so craft. Okay, we talked about this offline separately, but you gave us some predictions about the business, but the craft, one thing you shared with me because of the whole COVID thing, that you're having to write scenes that are more contained, not as many people, kind of addressing some of it. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, kind of how was the craft being shifted by virtue of the pandemic?
Well, I mean, you're always given not always, but sometimes you have a certain amount of window between when you've written a script and what the production demands are. And so with a lot of production that's going to start happening after the summertime, a lot of it's going to start happening. Mm-hmm. There's like a sliding scale of, based on the number of people who have contracted, you know, COVID, how many extras you can have in a scene, and how many people are going to be on screen, how many people are going to be on set. Like the crews are they're much smaller, so they want where you're shooting to be smaller, meaning they would prefer you to be able to shoot indoors in a contained space or outdoors with very few people. And so that's just so the opposite of the way you creatively write, because you have to see things as what's the best version of this. And so to now write in a way of like safety precautions and people and how many people can be on stage and how many people can be on the screen, we'll figure it out because we have to figure it out. But I don't, because we didn't start the process thinking about this, it's not going to be smooth. Like it's a completely different thing if somebody told you, hey, we're going to shoot something in September, but because of COVID, try not to have a lot of characters, try to make it minimal. Your brain would start in that place, and then you can make a smooth transition story-wise. When you have to do it the opposite way, it's just going to be a little clunky. There's no way around it. We're gonna all try our best, but eventually you're going to see scenes that should be grand and amazing. And maybe the creative way to do it, if off the top of my head, is if someone's going to perform at a concert, instead of seeing them on stage performing, you might see them backstage, and in the background there's a digital space of all these people, and we'll just add in music and noise to make it seem amazing, and then you'll just have a conversation for 3 minutes.
Wow.
And then you'll end the episode with that person running out on a stage, and you'll just stay there. Like, that's the way you have to figure out certain things.
Wow.
It looks like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
The sound design will make it feel that way. We'll digitally make it look like there's 300 people out there. But it has to then fit where this emotional exchange needs to be as big as seeing somebody out there performing on a stage.
It's really going to push you.
It is. It's going to push people. It's going to make them very frustrated because this is like already, I mean, as writers, you think you're comfortable being in your own head, but every writer I know is like, it is hard to come up with shit right now. It's just your brain is just in it's a weird space because socializing helps you create.
Yeah.
So to be in a position where you're not socializing, it's almost like having a conversation with yourself instead of with people, which is what we're supposed to do.
A couple fun questions before we close out. Has there been a character that you created that you, out of all the TV, film, that you really, really like enjoyed seeing on screen that you can think of at the moment?
Ooh, that's tough. It's tougher because I think about creating things, and I don't know if it's a character. It'd be moments. Sometimes there are moments. Sometimes
probably that kiss. I love you scene you talked about earlier.
Yeah, and like there's other things you write where sometimes you're like, oh, that moment turned out really well. Okay. It's tougher because it's different. Like if I was like David Chase and you create like something like Sopranos, which is really from your heart and like your perspective and stuff, it's different. When you're writing on other people's projects and so many other things happen, you kind of, the moments get more retained than the characters.
And then is there anything you want to recommend we check out, sample, in terms of a great sample of storytelling or writing, in terms of material you created, other people created, anything you want to promote?
It's tough out there. I mean, I really like, what is it, Black #AF?
Yeah.
I think that was like, it was a very interesting space because Kenya Barris is like, again, one of those people who's not a staff writer, but a guy working on staff. He creates this show, Blackish, which is out of his own experience. And then he creates this show on Netflix, which is like him looking at himself making the show Blackish.
Wow.
And it's such a meditation on what it means to be Black, rich, and famous. And how all of those things get juggled at once.
Wow.
It's one of those things where, like, the first time I watched it, I was like, man, why is Kenya Barris doing this? And then you understand he's working through something on screen.
Wow.
And allowing all of us to see it. I think it's one of those things where, like, once you put people onto it, you can laugh because it's super funny, but then you also see, this is the first time I've seen someone representing something that I think is absolutely something out of 2020. And it couldn't have been made in the 80s or the 90s or anywhere else. It's so much about what that space is right now.
But what you said about TV, we got to be more innovative in storytelling, fresh new direction. Like, this would probably be a great example of that.
Yeah, it makes you immediately think, like, how are you making stories or how are you making commentary on the world? Because I feel like, I came out of watching 90s indie films, and you almost felt like when you were watching Tarantino and Spike Lee and like Paul Thomas Anderson, you were watching people make stuff, they were making these big comments and making these big versions of the world that we live in. And I think in the last couple of years, it feels like everything's safer. And people aren't saying or yelling out, let's talk about the world we live in. Let's talk about the people we are now. Let's talk about what's great about us, what's not great about us. Social commentary, I just think, has gone away. I mean, working on Empire, Empire was like a great social commentary show. Like, it was the first time, I think, as Black people, we like took a look at our accountability for homophobia. Wow. Like, things that were always talked about privately, but never publicly.
On screen.
And you start to think to yourself, we've got so many more voices, and we're seeing people of color. Wow. But are we saying something very specific? Like, I like certain shows like Insecure. I feel like they capture stuff that like makes you go, oh, that's interesting. Nobody else is making that. Nobody else is saying that. But on the drama side, again, Insecure is a comedy. The Kenya Barris thing is a comedy. But on the drama side, I mean, we don't have The Wire.
Yeah, no, we don't. We don't have The Sopranos. We don't have The Wire. We don't have Bold Empire. We don't have a lot of great shows from 10, 15 years ago that I think were great social commentary about where we are today.
Yeah.
In our society. So, but listen, brother, this has been a pleasure, man. I mean, I think you've taken us through so many elements: business, creative, production, social commentary through content. So I think there's a lot to unpack here for the people watching this episode. So I appreciate you making the time. And it's good to be just chopping up with a brother and even see you do what you're doing in the business, because as you mentioned earlier, there are not many of us or you in those rooms. So we gotta, again, hopefully, we'll see some more changes, but we gotta do what we can do to shift that change. So again, just hats off to you, to your success, the hard work you put in, to being able to graduate out of the NTA into Hollywood, you know what I'm saying? That extra $1.50, you're not worried about it making another $1.50 an hour anymore. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
exactly.
Where's the extra $150,000 on the check? Right? Yeah,
exactly.
So your former coworkers down in NTA and the subway, I'm very proud of you right now. Sure.
Thank you, brother.
You're killing it. So listen, guys, if you want to catch more episodes of Brooklyn Boardroom or just follow what we're doing content-wise, you can find the show on BKLYN Boardroom on Instagram, or BKLYN Boardroom on Twitter, or the Brooklyn Boardroom on YouTube. Subscribe, like, forward, post, share, and become part of the family. And let me hear from you if you want to see an interview with someone that I may not be thinking about. So again, another episode of Brooklyn Boardroom. We wish you all the best. And thanks again, Michael, for being a part of the conversation, bro.
Thank you for having me, man.
All right, deuces to all you guys, and see you in the next episode of Brooklyn Boardroom. I'm Jay Christopher. Deuces.